Chapter 1. To save my fiancée, I was burned over my entire body. In return, she turned around and married my illegitimate half-brother. The day they exchanged rings at their lavish wedding was the day I starved to death in a forgotten basement. When I opened my eyes again, I was back at the start of the fire. I saw Chloe Vance in the heart of the blaze, screaming for my help, her face a mask of desperation. I watched her, and I felt nothing. Then I pulled the emergency exit door shut. This time, you could be damned together. Ethan, save me. Please, you have to save me. Thick smoke billowed around me, the roar of the fire filling the air. I stood frozen for a second, a dizzying sense of déjà vu washing over me as I realized what was happening. I was back, reborn at the very beginning of the nightmare. In my last life, I charged into that inferno without a second thought to save Chloe when a section of the ceiling collapsed. I shielded her with my own body. The result: severe third-degree burns over 80% of my body. My face was gone, melted into a ruin. Chloe, however, escaped with only minor injuries. Afterward, she knelt by my hospital bed, sobbing and swearing she would take care of me for the rest of our lives. But then she married my father's bastard son, Ryan. My own family, disgusted by my crippled state, gradually shifted their affection and support to him, the product of a one-night stand. In the end, they locked me in the basement and left me to die. Ethan, I'm so scared. Please come get me. Chloe's screams continued, pulling me from my memories. The fire was growing more intense, the building groaning under the heat with a series of sickening cracks and pops. This time, I didn't hesitate. I turned and ran for the emergency exit, ignoring the desperate cries fading behind me. You deserve this, I thought. This is your karma. Without me there to shield her, Chloe would finally pay the price for her hypocrisy. When I next heard news of Chloe, it was in the sterile quiet of a hospital. She was barely alive, clinging to life by a thread. They'd revived her multiple times, but she was still in critical condition. Even if she survived, she was, for all intents and purposes, gone. Burns covered over 70% of her body. Her face was destroyed, and there was a high probability of lifelong paralysis. When I heard the diagnosis, I nearly laughed out loud. I had to cover my mouth, faking a sob to hide my grin. She deserved it. On the outside, I played the part of the devoted fiancé to perfection. My face, a mask of unbearable grief. Chloe's parents, the Vances, were utterly destroyed. They fainted repeatedly after seeing what was left of their daughter. They poured a fortune into flying in specialists from all over the country. But the conclusion was always the same: Chloe's life was over. Not only that, but her ability to have children was completely gone. It made sense. The lower half of her body had been horrifically burned. Her womb was gone. What could anyone expect? When Mr. Vance heard this, he collapsed on the spot. The Vances were an old money family, proud of their lineage. Preserving the bloodline was everything to them, and Chloe was their only child. Her condition meant the end of their family name. That very evening, I overheard them quietly discussing the possibility of surrogacy. I knew this reaction all too well. This is how people are. The grief is real, but it doesn't last forever. They always find a new vessel for their hopes, a replacement. It's exactly what happened to my family in my last life. Chapter 2. After I was disfigured, my father, Robert Reed, was silent at first. But with his company needing a successor, he eventually acknowledged the bastard son he'd had with some cocktail waitress years ago, making him the new heir. Ryan Hale was hard-working, smart, and handsome, the spitting image of the ideal son my father had always wanted. In the end, when Chloe chose to marry Ryan, my father and the rest of my family simply let it happen. They showered that snake with all the love and resources that were once mine. At first, I didn't blame Ryan, but after he set me up and betrayed me time and time again, I finally saw him for the ungrateful parasite he was. He would visit me, feigning concern, only to sigh with manufactured guilt as he left. If anyone asked, he'd say, "Don't blame my brother. I'm the one who doesn't deserve to be a part of this family. I've taken everything from him. I deserve whatever happens to me." He loved showing off how much Chloe adored him, forcing me to look at picture after picture of them together. The more I suffered, the more Ryan gloated. And Chloe, The woman I had sacrificed everything to save, let it all happen. I later found out that it was her idea to bring Ryan into the family in the first place. She was the one who personally introduced the bastard to my father. Even back then, I suspected those two had been sleeping together behind my back. I just didn't have the energy or the means to investigate. But this time, every last secret was going to come out into the light. After leaving the hospital, I drove back to our family estate in Scarsdale. When my parents saw me walk through the door unharmed, the relief on their faces was palpable. Like Chloe, I was her only son. If anything had happened to me, the door would have been wide open for Ryan to waltz in. "Mom, Dad," I began, my voice heavy with rehearsal. "Even though this has happened to Chloe, I won't abandon her. I'll stay by her side, and we'll figure out the future once she's recovered." My father's face broke into a proud smile. He nodded, pleased. Our families, the Reeds and the Van Cess, have been allies for generations. Abandoning Chloe now would be a social and business catastrophe. "My son has grown up," he said, his eyes filled with approval. "It's time for you to start taking over the company." In his eyes, I was his pride and joy. I'd always been a top student, smart and capable. My business instincts were sharp, making me a standout among the heirs of other wealthy families. That's why he couldn't accept my disfigurement in the last life. He'd rather pour everything into a bastard son to replace me, just to reclaim his sense of superiority. For my father, that feeling of superiority was essential. The person who provided it, however, was completely replaceable. A month passed. Chloe still hadn't woken up, but I visited her every day, playing the part of the doting fiancé, ensuring her care was immaculate. Mr. and Mrs. Vance were so moved by my unwavering loyalty that they gifted me a steady stream of expensive watches and even property deeds. I accepted every single one. Of course, these gifts weren't free. Watching Mr. and Mrs. Vance waste away with grief was more than I could bear. The next day, I took them to a high-end adoption agency. "You know," I said gently, "you might consider adopting a child." They both froze, staring at me, speechless. I knew exactly what they were thinking. There was shock, confusion, and hesitation, but not a hint of refusal. I had already done my research. They had tried IVF for years without success. They were too old now. The issue had been a source of great anxiety for them, and they had already been quietly looking into adoption. They didn't have much choice. Mr. Vance's cousins were already circling like vultures, eyeing the family fortune. Better to raise a grateful, obedient child than to let their legacy fall into the hands of those greedy relatives. Their only real concern was that adopting now while Chloe was in a coma would seem cruel. They were afraid of how she might react if she ever woke up. But that wasn't a problem. Not with me there. "Please don't say no just yet," I urged, my voice full of emotion. "I'm not just speaking for myself. I'm thinking of Chloe. Chloe is the most devoted daughter. How could she bear to see you two grow old and lonely with no one to care for you?" My eyes welled up as I guided them into the agency. They offered weak protests, but their gazes were already captivated by the children playing inside. Their eyes softened, filling with a warmth I hadn't seen in weeks. Their objections died on their lips. Soon they were discussing with me which child seemed the brightest. After a morning of interviews, they went home with a thick stack of files, their faces full of a new, fragile hope. Things moved quickly after that. The Van Cess adopted a 6-year-old boy named Leo and held a formal reception to introduce him to society, inviting dozens of prominent families. At the party, someone whispered that the Van Cess were heartless, adopting a stranger before their daughter was even gone. I immediately stepped in. "That's enough," I said, my voice cutting through the murmurs. "You have no right to judge. This was my idea. I'm Chloe's fiancé with her unable to. It's my duty to see her parents are cared for. It was killing me to see them in so much pain. Adopting a child to bring some light back into their lives is what Chloe would have wanted. If she wakes up, I know she'll agree." I spoke with righteous conviction. On the stage, Mr. and Mrs. Vance were wiping tears from their eyes. With my public endorsement, the rest of the evening went smoothly. As I was leaving, Mrs. Vance pressed a set of keys and more property deeds into my hand. Another fortune's worth. On the way home, my calm was shattered. Chapter 4. A young man suddenly appeared at the gate of our estate, blocking the path of the sedan as it turned into the driveway. Our driver, Arthur, slammed on the brakes. The inertia threw us forward. Once the dizziness faded, I pushed open the car door. The familiar yet unwelcome face stared back at me. A cold smirk touched my lips. "Ryan, hail, fancy seeing you here." When Ryan saw me step out of the car, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. His face went pale. "Ethan Reed, you're alive," he blurted out. "You were supposed to be in a vegetative state." Arthur immediately moved to intercept him. "What are you crazy?" he yelled. "Get away from the car," cursing "Mister. You're like that. You've got a death wish." Ryan ignored him, shoving Arthur aside. He rushed to my father's window, banging on the glass. "Dad, it's me. It's Ryan, your son, with Linda Monroe. Don't you remember me? Please, just look at me." My father, still shaken from the sudden stop, stared in bewilderment at the frantic man outside. Seeing that Arthur had Ryan restrained, my father scrambled out of the car and grabbed my arm. "Ethan, get back in the car quickly. This man is insane," he yelled, pulling me toward the vehicle. His words hit Ryan like a physical blow. Ryan's eyes turned red, and his pleas grew more desperate, listing memories he and my father had supposedly shared. All he got in return was my father muttering, "What a psycho!" In our previous life, Ryan had been my father's golden boy. He had never experienced such a humiliating dismissal. Even as the car pulled through the gates and they slowly closed, Ryan's agonized cries echoed across the lawn, a sound so raw it was chilling. My father quickly dismissed the incident, writing it off as a random encounter with a lunatic. But I knew the truth. Ryan had been reborn, too, just like me. He had all his memories from our past life. According to the original timeline, this was when Chloe was supposed to introduce him to my parents. But now everything was different. Chloe was the one lying helpless in a hospital bed. She couldn't pull any strings for him now. And since the van kept the full extent of Chloe's injuries a tightly guarded secret, Ryan, a nobody college student, had no way of knowing what had really happened. He was panicking. That's why he made such a desperate, reckless move to force his way back into my father's world. A few days later, the private investigator's report on Chloe and Ryan landed on my desk. It was a thick file detailing a sordid secret love story. They had met 2 years ago. Chapter 5, a wealthy girl and a brilliant, ambitious student from the wrong side of the tracks. It didn't take long for them to fall for each other. All this time, Chloe was still with me. She played the part of the perfect girlfriend while secretly carrying on with Ryan. Her plan had always been to get him into the Reed family. But there was no way the Van Cess would ever accept a poor kid like him, no matter how smart he was. So in her last life, after I was injured, she'd quickly forged a DNA test. Under the guise of helping my father cope, she brought Ryan in to take my place, securing the perfect future for her true love. The most ironic part, a year before the fire, Chloe had already coached Ryan to mimic my mannerisms, my speech patterns, even my business ideas and creative concepts. He was a perfect copy. Reading this, I realized that even without the fire, Chloe would have found a way to get Ryan into my family. All it would have taken was a convenient accident to get me out of the picture, either dead or disabled. But I wasn't in a hurry to expose them or to get my revenge on Ryan. The timing wasn't right. The suffering I endured in my past life, they would experience every last bit of it. 2 weeks later, we got a call from the hospital. Chloe was awake. I was at the Vance estate having tea with Mrs. Vance and bringing some new toys for Leo. When she heard the news, her expression was a mixture of shock and unease. She clutched Leo tightly, unable to speak for a long moment. It was understandable. Chloe had been in a coma for so long that even the doctors had given up hope. Everyone assumed she would remain in a vegetative state for the rest of her life. Her waking was a miracle no one had expected. "Don't worry," I said, patting her hand reassuringly. "Chloe is a good daughter. She'll understand why you did what you did. Besides, Leo is so charming and smart. I'm sure she'll love him. I'll be there with you." My words seemed to calm her, and she hurried off to the hospital. As it turns out, any person who wakes up to find themselves permanently disabled, only to learn their parents have already adopted a replacement, is going to lose their mind. The scene in the hospital room was even more chaotic than I'd imagined. Chloe was screaming, hurling anything she could reach. Her face was a twisted mask of rage. "You're monsters, both of you," she shrieked. "I'm not even dead, and you've already replaced me with some little bastard. Everything the Vances have is mine. No one is taking it from me." The outburst terrified her parents. It especially frightened Leo, who had been brought along to meet his new sister. The little boy had never seen anything like it. Though he was trembling, he didn't run. He stood firm in front of Mr. and Mrs. Vance. "Don't be scared. Mommy and Daddy," he said, his small voice resolute. "Leo will protect you." In that instant, both of them started crying, overwhelmed with emotion. They mumbled a few words to Chloe and then left with Leo, walking away without a backward glance. Chapter 6. Their departure was swift and final. Chloe sat stunned on her bed, her mind reeling. She couldn't understand how a stranger, an adopted outsider, could have stolen her parents' love so completely and so quickly. The answer was simple. Leo was a prodigy, a true genius. His aptitude for languages was astounding. Within weeks, he was speaking conversational French. His artistic talents were even more remarkable. At the adoption party, his impromptu piano performance earned a standing ovation from a group of professional musicians. A world-renowned concert pianist in attendance immediately offered to take him on as his private student. Once enrolled in school, he mastered advanced coursework with ease, acing every exam. He quickly became known as the Vance prodigy in high society circles, bringing his new parents an immense amount of pride. Chloe, on the other hand, was now a disfigured invalid who did nothing but scream and lash out at everyone around her. The contrast was stark. "Chloe, can't you be a little more mature?" I was the only one who would stay behind. My voice was laced with disappointment. "Have you thought for a second about what your parents have been through? The pain they've suffered. If it weren't for Leo, they would have completely fallen apart. Did you want to watch them self-destruct?" With that, I stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind me. Her hysterical sobs followed me down the hall. I leaned against the wall outside, listening to her cries, a feeling of deep satisfaction washing over me. "Don't call me cruel. I was simply replaying the script she wrote for me in our last life." Back then, as I lay paralyzed in my hospital bed, I watched my parents dote on Ryan, laughing and smiling as if I didn't exist. When Chloe saw the look on my face, she would scold me. She called me selfish and ungrateful. She said that by not accepting Ryan, I was driving my parents to an early grave. I had tried to explain to them that the reason I couldn't smile was because the nerves in my face were dead. I couldn't make any expressions, but no one listened. Chloe would just lead my parents away, telling them I needed time to reflect. Did anyone ever care about my pain? The Chloe of today could at least speak and move her upper body. The me of the past was a quadriplegic. I could move nothing but my eyes and my mouth. The agony I endured was far greater than anything she was experiencing now. After I left, Chloe continued her tantrums for several more days. At first, her parents still felt a lingering tenderness for their daughter. But Chloe's constant rage and her venomous insults toward Leo eventually wore them down. They lost all patience. They stopped visiting the hospital altogether, saying they were giving her space to calm down and recover. Chapter 7. They instructed the hospital staff not to allow any visitors, terrified that Chloe would say something to reporters that would tarnish the family name. I was the only person granted access. By now, I had solidified my position with Vance. They treated me like a son, and Leo adored me, calling me his big brother every time he saw me. Mrs. Vance would often take my hand and say, "Ethan, once all this blows over, we want to formally adopt you as our own. You're a good boy, Ethan. We see everything you've done for us." Everyone knew the score. In Chloe's condition, she would never find a suitable husband. A man from a family like mine would never be willing to spend his life as her caretaker. What I was doing now was seen as the height of decency. Mrs. Vance's offer to make me their godson was a strategic move, a way to maintain our close family ties while severing any future marital obligation. For the next few days, I continued my visits to the hospital without fail. Each time, I delivered a short, sharp lecture about her selfishness and immaturity, then turned and left. Day after day, the routine wore her down. Finally, Chloe broke. She bribed a nurse to contact the one person she believed could save her, Ryan Hale, her true love. Ryan rushed to the hospital as soon as he got the message. When he saw the disfigured woman in the hospital bed, he covered his mouth in horror, tears streaming down his face. "Chloe, what happened to you?" he gasped. "Don't scare me like this." Ryan couldn't comprehend it. Ethan was supposed to protect her. How could this have happened? It was Ethan. Chloe hissed, her voice full of venom. "That bastard saw the fire and just ran. He left me there to die. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be like this." After hearing her story, Ryan was silent for a long time, piecing it all together. He then told her everything about his own rebirth and the events of their previous life. They spent hours analyzing the situation, their conclusion fueled by rage and bitterness. "It was all my fault. Why hadn't I risked my life to save Chloe? It was because I was selfish. They had to get revenge. They had to take back everything they had lost." Watching all of this on the discreetly placed camera feed, I couldn't help but sneer. Trash always finds its way to other trash. It's a law of nature. Soon, Chloe's plan began. She suddenly became quiet and cooperative. When I visited, she would force a smile, acting as if nothing was wrong. Her change in demeanor eventually softened her parents' resolve, and they began visiting her again. Of course, they always brought their precious son, Leo. Chapter 8. Every time they talked about the boy, they couldn't help but gush with pride. "Oh, Chloe. Leo is such a genius. He just got a perfect score on his entrance exam for the gifted program, and he played a piano concerto for us when he got home. When Leo grows up and makes a name for himself, he'll take good care of you. I promise." With every word of praise for Leo, Chloe's face would twitch, a storm of colors passing over it as she gritted her teeth and forced herself to smile and agree, all while picturing herself tearing the little boy to pieces. A month later, Chloe couldn't hold it in any longer. "Mom, Dad," she announced, "I want to marry Ethan. I know I'm not good enough for him now, but I swear I'll do everything I can to get better. We're in love. I know Ethan won't abandon me." The room fell into a dead silence. When no one responded, Chloe's voice turned sharp. She threatened to throw herself off the hospital roof if they didn't agree. Just as I walked through the door, she grabbed my wrist, insisting I take her to the county clerk's office right then and there. She said she had already picked a date. A crowd quickly gathered in the hallway. People were murmuring, and some had their phones out streaming live on Instagram. A narrative began to form, whispered from person to person. Chloe had been injured while saving me from the fire. The implication was clear. If I didn't marry her now, I was an ungrateful monster. Then Chloe unleashed an Oscar-worthy performance. She snatched a scalpel from a medical tray and held it to her own wrist. "Ethan, I saved you because I wanted to. I would never force you into anything," she cried. "I'll just end my own life." The crowd immediately turned on me. "That guy is so heartless. Cold as ice. It's just marriage. What's the big deal? She saved your life, you bastard." As the scene spiraled out of control, Mr. Vance, who had been silent until now, finally acted. He lunged forward and wrestled the scalpel from Chloe's hand. "Stop this," he roared. "Your mother and I have already named Ethan our godson. You two are brother and sister now. Stop this madness." The truth dawned on him. Chloe's good behavior over the past month, her convincing them to let go of her private nurses, it was all a setup for this public spectacle. The people in the crowd were probably hired. Mrs. Vance, her heartbreaking, added, "Chloe, dear, you've not only lost your looks, you can't have children. If you force Ethan to marry you, you'd be ruining his life." Chapter 9. You'd be ending his family line. A gasp went through the crowd. Wait, she can't have kids, so she's barren. And she still expects him to marry her. That's just evil. Good on the parents for looking out for the guy. Chloe's face turned ashen. She trembled, her hands clenched into fists, looking as though she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. For a woman, having her most private medical details shouted in a public space was the ultimate humiliation. And for it to come from her own mother, it was a betrayal she couldn't comprehend. Just as public opinion turned completely against her, a new voice piped up from the crowd. A plant, no doubt. Fine, he doesn't have to marry her. But she got like this saving him. He should at least compensate her. Give her half his fortune. Chloe met my gaze, a cold, triumphant smirk on her face. She was certain that with no cameras or witnesses in the fire, she could invent any story she wanted. By making the first move, she put me on the defensive. If I denied it, I'd look like an even bigger scumbag trying to shirk responsibility. Either way, she won. She pressed her advantage, describing in vivid detail how I had passed out from smoke inhalation and how she had heroically dragged my unconscious body from the inferno, sacrificing her own chance to escape. Her story was so moving that some people in the crowd actually started to tear up. At that exact moment, a swarm of reporters burst into the room. They saw me and immediately surrounded me. "Mr. Reed, can we get a comment?" "Sir, about you repeatedly entering the fire to rescue people. What gave you such courage?" "Mr. Reed, will you be attending the Mayor's Award ceremony for civic heroes?" Everyone in the room stared, completely baffled. One of the reporters held up his phone. The headlines on every major news site were about me. #ErtoReed, a real-life hero saves multiple lives in downtown blaze. Survivors post videos thanking mystery savior. #hero identified as Ethan Reed, son of business magnate Robert Reed. Next to the bold red headlines were photos and videos from the scene that showed me nimble and focused, using my knowledge of the building's layout and the fire's behavior to navigate the chaos. I was seen charging back into the burning building again and again, carrying or dragging more than a dozen people to safety. My face was covered in soot, but I never hesitated. I only left when the first responders finally arrived. The security footage was grainy, but it captured everything. At that moment, every eye in the room turned to Chloe. Chapter 10. It was obvious to everyone. A man in my condition clearly hadn't needed saving. Besides, she just claimed I was unconscious. Then who was the person running into the flames on the video? A ghost. Chloe's face was the color of ash. She was shaking uncontrollably. "I must have misremembered," she stammered. The room erupted. Mr. and Mrs. Vance looked at their daughter with a mixture of shame and fury, as if they couldn't believe she was capable of such a pathetic, vicious lie. In the car on the way home, I pulled out my phone. As expected, the internet was on fire with denunciations of Chloe's deceit. Everything that had happened in that hospital room had been broadcast live. The crew Chloe had hired cut their feed as soon as things went south, but the team I'd hired stayed on until the very end. I'd even paid for a premium high-speed connection just to make sure the whole glorious train wreck was captured for posterity. Of course, I knew every move Chloe was going to make. Security cameras are a wonderful thing. Every twist and turn of today's little drama had been under my complete control. It was no surprise that Mr. and Mrs. Vance took my side. Beyond our family's long-standing relationship, I had also provided them with proof of Chloe's other betrayals. Not only was she trying to ruin me, but she had also been secretly selling Vance Industries' corporate secrets to a rival company. She was trying to destroy her own parents. Faced with that, they were ready to disown her, let alone help me with a little public theater. As for the rescue, every part of it was real. After I'd left Chloe to her fate, I saw the flames, the chaos, the terror on people's faces. My heart clenched. I remembered the feeling of being trapped in a fire, the absolute despair. I knew that feeling better than anyone. I had to save them. I'd taken firefighter training courses as a volunteer years ago, and I was in good physical shape. Armed with the knowledge of how things had played out in my past life, I charged in. The smoke burned my lungs and the heat seared my skin, but I pushed through. I refused to let anyone else suffer the same fate I had. After it was over, I slipped away quietly. It wasn't about being noble. It was about choosing the right moment to let a good deed be known. A moment just like this one. As for Ryan, he was currently sitting in a holding cell, waiting for someone to post his bail. He'd foolishly listened to Chloe and tried to steal sensitive data from the Vance Industries servers. This time, Mr. Vance was furious. He'd instructed his lawyers not to give an inch. Even for attempted corporate espionage, a judge could throw the book at him. But I didn't have time to worry about that. My schedule was about to get very, very busy. Media interviews and television appearances followed one after another. Business at the company exploded. Thanks to the hero story, Reed Corp's stock price soared to an all-time high. Chapter 11. My father, seizing the opportunity, began the process of formally handing over the reins of the company to me. My mother spent her days attending luncheons and charity events, beaming with pride as guests praised her wonderful son. Even more surprising, Mr. Vance, as a token of his gratitude, revoked all of Chloe's shares in the family company and signed a significant portion of them over to me. A welcome gift for his new godson, he called it. This period of triumph didn't last long. News came from the county jail about Ryan. It turned out Ryan and Chloe had a child, but that wasn't the shocking part. The key detail was that Chloe herself had no idea the child existed. Yet, Ryan insisted she was the mother. Apparently, they had frozen embryos together during a trip abroad. Ryan wanted to permanently bind Chloe to him and had secretly used a surrogate to carry the baby to term. Mr. and Mrs. Vance rushed to the jail overnight. After a quick investigation, they found the child, a 1-year-old boy. At first, they refused to believe it, but Ryan was convincing. He produced a DNA test and a mountain of intimate photos of himself and Chloe. His certainty began to wear them down. When Chloe heard the news, her reaction was telling. She forgot her injuries, her rage, everything. She demanded to see Ryan immediately. Anyone could see they had been together. Another DNA test was just a formality. The results came back quickly. The child was biologically Chloe's. That was the final straw for her parents. They were utterly disgusted. This proved she'd been cheating on me with Ryan all along. With a biological heir now in his hand, Ryan's arrogance became unbearable. He complained about the conditions in jail and demanded to be released. He started making demands for luxury goods, threatening to take the child and disappear if he didn't get his way. Mr. and Mrs. Vance, though seething with resentment, felt they had no choice. For the sake of their family's reputation and their newfound grandson, they gave in. But Ryan's appetite only grew larger. He demanded a wedding. A real lavish wedding with Chloe put the Vances in an impossible position. A marriage meant officially recognizing Ryan as their son-in-law. But everyone knew I was, or had been, Chloe's fiancé. The timeline of the secret baby made it painfully obvious that Chloe had been cheating and Ryan was a homewrecker. I was currently being celebrated as a city-wide hero. If it came out that I had been cheated on so brazenly, the public backlash against Chloe, Ryan, and the entire Vance family would be devastating. They tried to stall, but Ryan wouldn't wait. Chapter 12. He no longer cared about public opinion. He was tired of being treated like dirt. In his past life, Chloe had paved his way into high society. This time he was on his own. When the Vances hesitated, Ryan went nuclear. He posted all of his intimate photos with Chloe on his Instagram account with a caption, "Love wins. Wedding date coming soon." By the time Mr. and Mrs. Vance found out, the damage was done. The post had gone viral. Online sleuths quickly dug up evidence of his secret child and videos of him and Chloe together before the fire. The narrative was set in stone. Chloe was a cheater, and they were a despicable pair. But the criticism didn't faze them. When you have no morals, what is there to be ashamed of? Ryan even replied to angry comments. "Who are you calling a gold digger? All that matters is true love. Love isn't about who came first. It's about who is true. We're going to be together forever." Their stunt nearly gave Mr. and Mrs. Vance a stroke, but they were trapped. After weighing their options, they caved to Ryan's demands. They knew it would be a PR nightmare, but they were desperate to hold on to their only grandchild. They were willing to pay any price. They agreed to all of Ryan's outrageous conditions, taking back the company shares they had gifted me and most cruelly sending their adopted son, Leo, back to the orphanage. I could turn a blind eye to the rest, but not to what they planned for Leo. After living with him, I couldn't bear to see the boy abandoned again. I argued with them, but they were resolute. Blood was thicker than water, they insisted. They had only adopted Leo because they thought they had no heir. Now that they had a biological grandson, their connection to an outsider was meaningless. Their hypocrisy was stunning. I didn't waste any more breath on such faithless people. I took Leo home with me. My parents surprisingly welcomed him with open arms. Since I was now running the company, they had plenty of free time, and they found joy in caring for the boy. As a result of their scandalous behavior, Vance Industries' stock plummeted. The company was in turmoil. The board and the employees were furious with Mr. Vance's selfish, reckless decisions. Seizing the moment, Mr. Vance's cousins began poaching top talent and buying up shares. Meanwhile, my own career was skyrocketing. The more people despised Chloe and Ryan, the more they sympathized with and supported me. Public sentiment was overwhelmingly in my favor. 7 days later, Chloe and Ryan held their wedding. Chapter 13. Mr. and Mrs. Vance spared no expense. Having chosen to embrace their grandson, they had to see it through. But despite the opulent decorations and lavish feast, the grand ballroom was nearly empty. Who would want to attend the wedding of two such morally bankrupt individuals? I heard that after the reception, Ryan flew into a rage and smashed millions of dollars worth of wedding gifts. And Chloe unbelievably had the audacity to text me. "Ethan Reed, this is all your fault, isn't it? Does it make you happy to see me humiliated? Let me tell you something. I will never ever love you. One day you'll regret this." I actually laughed. I replied, "Are you delusional or just a pathological liar? You should really see a psychiatrist." Then I blocked her number. 2 months later, I received some interesting news. Ryan's child wasn't from his and Chloe's surrogate at all. It was his child with another woman. Just like that, Mr. and Mrs. Vance's desperate gamble had failed. For that child, they had sacrificed their reputation, alienated their allies, and nearly destroyed their company. The resentment from their own executives was at a breaking point. They were so distraught they even accused me of orchestrating the whole thing as revenge. I didn't say a word. I just filed a police report for slander. The subsequent investigation quickly cleared my name and proved that Ryan had forged the DNA test from the very beginning to deceive them. It was their own greed and desperation that had led to their downfall. The news sent both of them to the hospital with stress-induced heart problems. By the time they were discharged, they discovered their company was no longer theirs. Mr. Vance's cousin had staged a successful hostile takeover. The chairmanship was gone. This series of blows aged them a decade overnight. And to make matters worse, they still had to deal with Chloe and Ryan, who were now at each other's throats. As soon as Chloe found out the child wasn't hers, she snapped. The two fought constantly, their screaming matches echoing through the hospitals. Finally, Mr. and Mrs. Vance gave up on their daughter completely. They left her a sum of money and simply disappeared. Ryan, as soon as he got the money, checked Chloe out of the hospital, dumped her in a rented basement, and washed his hands of her. The basement he chose was the very same one where I had died in my past life. Soon after, Chloe was dead, just like me. She had starved to death alone. She had called Ryan for help countless times, but he had ignored her, telling her to stop being such a spoiled princess. Her body wasn't discovered for over a week. For this, Ryan was charged with negligent homicide and, given the circumstances, sentenced to death. After the trial, Mr. and Mrs. Vance finally reappeared. They dealt with Chloe's funeral arrangements. And then, instead of disappearing again, they came to see me. They were looking for Leo. With their daughter and son-in-law gone, they finally remembered the other child, the one they had so easily cast aside, old and broken. They no longer cared about bloodlines. Too bad. Leo was long gone. "You probably haven't seen the news," I said, holding up my tablet. "Leo has been reunited with his birth parents. He's the youngest son of Julian Croft, the wealthiest man in Asia. He was kidnapped as a toddler and ended up in the system. The headlines were everywhere. #billionaire's lost son credits Ethan Reed for his rescue. #gratitude. Croft invests billions in Reed Corporation expansion. #The of Ethan Reed, a story of karma and kindness." At that moment, Mr. and Mrs. Vance finally understood what they had lost. If they hadn't abandoned Leo, the Crofts' gratitude and their immense fortune would have been directed at them. They would have secured the kind of power and wealth I now possessed. But now it was too late. That blessing was not for them. They mumbled a few hollow congratulations and quickly left. As I watched them walk away, a slow smile spread across my face. The truth is, I was never as kind as I appeared. I had known who Leo was from the very beginning. In my past life, while I was wasting away in the hospital, I'd seen a news report. Billionaire Julian Croft's lost son was found dead, starved in a local orphanage. Reborn this time, I was determined to seize every opportunity. I was the one who steered the Vances to that specific adoption agency. I was the one who had the director recommend Leo. My investigators had told me Leo had lost his memory when he arrived at the orphanage, but his intelligence was undeniable. A child like that, I knew they wouldn't be able to resist. It was a shame they were too cruel and selfish to hold on to him. Their loss was my gain. It allowed me to take him in, a perfectly plausible act of kindness that wouldn't raise any suspicion. I handed them a golden opportunity. It's their own fault they threw it away. Ryan's secret child was also part of my plan. In a last life, he'd managed to keep that child hidden from Chloe. This time, I made sure the truth came out. I had an anonymous source tip Ryan off, telling him the Vances planned to take his son and then cut him loose. That's what panicked him into going public with his relationship with Chloe, ensuring he was tied to the family, even if it meant being labeled a home wrecker. To secure his position, he demanded marriage, he demanded Leo be sent away, he demanded shares and money. The Vances could have said no, but for the sake of a grandson that wasn't theirs, they said yes to everything. And so, their entire world came crashing down. As for that dark, damp basement, I didn't have to lift a finger. Ryan walked right into the trap. He knew perfectly well that leaving Chloe there alone was a death sentence. He did it on purpose. Just as he had tortured me in our last life, he tortured her in this one. He believed that with Chloe dead, her inheritance would fall to him. All I did was wait until she was close to death. And then I made an anonymous 911 call. Let them keep each other company on the road to hell. Later, my career continued its meteoric rise. I took Reed Corp to heights it had never seen before. And my parents, they started acting like all parents of a certain age. They began pressuring me to marry, to merge with another powerful family, to follow the path they had laid out for me. When I flatly refused, my father was humiliated. To punish me, to force me back under his control, he announced he was returning to the company to retake command. Only then did he realize that the world had moved on. His authority had been slowly and systematically replaced by mine over the years. Many of the company's key players didn't even know who he was. His orders were ignored. He didn't give up. He called his old partners, his friends, his investors. No one would take his side. After hitting wall after wall, my father finally understood. He had lost. I was no longer a pawn. He could move around the board. I was and would always be his greatest source of pride. And now he could only live in the shadow of that pride. This was my ultimate goal, the tragedy of my last life. Was it really just Chloe and Ryan's fault? Weren't my parents also complicit? They never laid a hand on me, never plotted against me, but they abandoned me. They took away my hope. Sometimes the one who stands by and does nothing is just as guilty as the one who holds a knife. Lying in that hospital bed for all those years, I came to see the world for what it is. If I could reach the absolute pinnacle of power, then even if I were paralyzed from the neck down, no one would ever dare to cast me aside. Love, family, friendship, all of it is temporary. It all fades. Only power and achievement are forever. From the moment I was reborn, my path has been clear. I let go of all attachments and threw myself completely into my work. I will never again give anyone the chance to hurt me. I will never again give anyone the chance to abandon me. I will make everyone look up to me. I will make everyone submit to me. I will make them all understand I, Ethan Reed, am not some weak man to be victimized. I am a man who decides the fate of others. In a story,